Welcome back to another episode of the Just Help Out Mindset podcast, where we are now officially a channel on YouTube. Yay! We have an amazing guest today, Dr. Andrew Dobo. He is here today to talk about EMDR. This is a trauma therapy. I'm so excited for everyone to learn about it. If anyone's going to learn about it, it needs to be from him. Dr. Dobo was trained in EMDR in 1998 while he was still in graduate school. He has administered over 15,000 EMDR sessions in his career. That's a lot of sessions. Now his days are spent consulting, writing, and teaching other therapists about EMDR therapy. Dr. Dobo is highly credentialed in EMDR and has lived his life as a Jungian. Am I saying that?
Jungian.
He recorded his first dream in 1978 while studying music as a young man living in Chicago. He has never stopped using his dreams as navigational tools in his life. He eventually noticed that as he was using the EMDR model, he was also integrating Jungian thought, which included dreams to explain the EMDR process with his clients. This observation eventually gave rise to his book, The Hero's Journey, which I recommend everyone get, and we'll show you how to get that book at the end of the show. It became clear to him that EMDR activated a transformational journey that the clients were invited to travel during his work with them. He noticed the clients move through 6 stages, and these 6 stages encompass the 12 steps of a hero's journey identified by Joseph Campbell. These observations were the catalyst for this book and his innovative EMDR trainings. He hopes more therapists will see the value of the myths that exist during EMDR, which we're going to talk about today. And I am so excited for him to tell us all about this amazing therapeutic technique. Welcome, Dr. Dobo.
Thanks for having me, Nicole.
All right.
Pleasure to be here.
Yes, I am so excited. You are the master of this. And everyone wants to know, what is EMDR?
Well, it's interesting. It started out as, I guess, therapists would call it a tool for their toolbox, right? So it sort of came on the scene in 1989. And at that time, therapists already had models that they were working from. And then here comes this sort of weird thing where you make people's eyes move back and forth, and it helps them resolve trauma. So people had to figure out how to fit that into what they were doing already. So this idea that, we integrate EMDR was like a procedure, but over the years, it's considered a model of therapy. It's just a freestanding model of therapy. So I'm an EMDR therapist. That's the model which I kind of see my clients from and from the world. So it's a model, that's a simple answer to your question, it's a model of psychotherapy. But I guess the thing what's different about it is there's a number of things. We call it EMDR is sort of we call it a bottom-up process, where most therapies are top-down. And what we're talking about is top meanings like your cortex. So the therapist is using their frontal lobe, and they're talking to the client, and they're using their frontal lobe. And you might work down towards emotional material, and the people might get upset, and then kind of you have a little bit of an experience in the session. With EMDR, bottom-up, it means that the client, we're really not going to talk about an experience. The client is going to have an experience. They're going to re-experience a situation that happened in the past, and then it'll resolve itself at the end of the session. So that's the short answer, I guess, a long short answer of what is EMDR. There's a couple of main differences. One, during EMDR, there's no talking, very little talking. So the healing is self-healing. It happens within the client's own head. It has very little to do with what I say or think. It happens all within the client. The client usually will get upset sometimes. They're re-experiencing a horrible memory, so there's some emotionality to it, and we don't stop and comfort them. They have to move through that on their own. So that's another difference. And sometimes when I train therapists, That's hard for therapists to just sit back and watch and not get in there and try to comfort, because we're kind of trained to do that. And then another thing that's a little different is that when there is some talking, the therapist might interrupt the client right in the middle of a sentence and say, go with that. And that's also unusual, and it could be a little off-putting. So we warn the client, but those are like there's many other differences, but those are like the three main differences is, there's not a whole lot of talking. We're going to interrupt. You're going to get upset, and you're going to work through it on your own. And I'm not going to do much help. Just make sure you're safe and make sure you're okay.
Something that I really, really like, that is an option too, is to have that private image, because some of the clients have such horrible trauma, they don't even want to tell the therapist. So explain just a little bit about how you can still do this therapy without even saying what happened.
Yeah, it's really amazing how little I need to know to do this. Like, I don't even have to know what the memory is if you don't want to tell me. And some people, they've had horrible things happen to them, or maybe they did something they're ashamed of, and it bothers them, so they don't need to tell me. I just need to know, do you have a picture in your mind of that, of the worst moment of that? And they do. Usually it's usually intrusive. It's usually not a problem getting the image of something that's so upsetting you don't even want to say it. Yeah. And then we pair it up with this negative belief, which the therapist helps them a little bit about what exactly that is. And then we just use the stimulation. EMDR is bilateral stimulation, which it's like, this is bilateral stimulation, nothing too dramatic. They sort of tap through this and the process starts.
And so that bilateral stimulation, that helps both of the sides of the brain communicate.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one way to kind of a simple explanation. And there's the information. The brain becomes overwhelmed. It could be a traumatic thing, and the brain's really not designed to handle something that's really an intense trauma. And so whenever that happens, the information gets stored in the amygdala, without getting in the weeds too much. And the amygdala is part of the brain where we have this response to something, like immediate response, right? But in the amygdala doesn't have time, space information. We just feel this thing. Something happened, and I feel this, right? And the information gets stuck there. It's supposed to, move over to this other part of the brain called the hippocampus that does give it space and time information. It says, hey, I don't, like a common example would be like a flashback of a veteran, let's say. That's an extreme version where the past of the client, the past is present, is a simple way where there's a problem when your past is present, where you feel this thing from 20 years ago. That's not supposed to happen, right? So the brain is kind of overwhelmed. And the normal mechanism that process information for us are broken down. And EMDR jumpstarts that process and repairs it so that information can process normally. So the client knows this thing happened, but when they think about it, they don't have to feel anything about it. They know it happened, but the somatas, the body sensations and the emotion, they're separated and they're gone. They're sent off where they're supposed to be. But it's really these sort of traumatic events where that stuff gets stuck. And you can think of something, you can smell something, you can hear a song, something, and you're right there again. And that's where EMDR fixes that.
Oh, it's so powerful. So powerful. Who do you recommend to get EMDR?
I didn't hear what you said, Nicole.
Who would you recommend should get EMDR?
Well, everybody. I mean, I know we're talking about, like trauma. And so there are people that have mental health diagnoses, and EMDR is pretty good. It's a model of therapy. So it's like any other therapy. We treat most diagnoses. There's some exceptions where, like bipolar, CBT helps, but you need medicine for that and to stabilize, and then you can do EMDR. And also there's my book is about not so much everybody needs a mental health diagnosis to benefit from EMDR, but everybody has a negative belief about themselves, and it's just impossible to get through childhood without it. And it causes us trouble. It's trouble. And those two thoughts, cognitions in America, they're the most common are I'm not good enough and I don't matter. And you don't have to have a mental health diagnosis for those, that kind of self-concept to be interfering in your life. And EMDR fixes that. So yeah, whenever I do a training, everybody practices for 20 hours and they cry and weep and have benefits, and everyone doesn't have a trauma and everyone doesn't have a mental health diagnosis, but they all have something that needs to be repaired, because you don't get through life without a wound, or so EMDR benefits all of that. And then the other thing about EMDR is it's not like a coping mechanism. It's not like I'm going to do this and then I'm going to think about this, and so if I get anxious, I'm going to do this thing to help. You're no longer anxious. It's gone. It's not managing. It gets rid of any distressing emotion and any of that stuff. It's just gone. The thing happened, but you don't feel anything about it.
It's amazing. It's so amazing. I mean, I just finished my training with Dr. Yeah,
It's like
yeah, and I myself had an amazing experience in one session with regarding my brother. Of course, that was extremely traumatic, and 20-30 minutes of EMDR, and I had this divine experience. It was incredible what showed up when, I guess, I like how you say it, we like tap into the REM part of your brain and just let your brain work through all this trauma. So after 15,000 EMDR sessions, tell me some good ones. Tell me some ones that you were just your favorites.
It's hard to call them like a favorite. I think when somebody loses a child,
Yeah.
And I probably I was thinking about that this morning. We're going to talk like, okay, I remember this young man drowned and this baby drowned, and then somebody committed suicide and somebody was in a car accident and another, so, those sessions are extremely emotional, but the clients, they could get on with their life. I mean, their life's never the same, but they start, making plans and getting through that process in a really accelerated way. Like when we talk about EMDR, a death of somebody that you love that's unexpected is a single episode event. Yeah. It just happened once. It's horrible, but it just happened once. And a single episode event, EMDR like heals that like with one hand tied behind its back. And it's shameful. It's kind of a shame that EMDR, everyone talks about trauma, but they don't talk about grief as if losing your child isn't traumatic, right? It's sort of somehow the grief, isn't seen as traumatic, when it is perhaps maybe the most traumatic thing in the civilian world that you might experience if you lose a child. So, and those all, I remember the first time I did that, and I was sort of new at EMDR. I'm going to say, well, I'll give this a try. I don't know about, if EMDR is going to fix the death of a 2-year-old drowning, Yeah. But it did. Few sessions, we talked about it, and they're kind of moving on, and, they can breathe again, and, I don't want to just talk, but my son died, 2 years ago, and I had one EMDR session and I could start to breathe again, So it is miraculous. I've been on both sides of the couch with an event like that. And then a more recent one, it wasn't me, it was one of the people that I'm working with. Like, you're doing your consultation call. So this was a woman who's working in a school system. This kind of weird accident happened with his car and the school bus. And so the kids had to get out of the bus because it was a smoking. And so, and they saw one of the drivers was like under the car. They saw this guy and so these 17-year-old football player guys said, let's go get that guy out. He's going to get killed. That car might start on fire. And one of the kids like yanked him out of there and pulled his arm out. So he had the arm. Oh. That's kind of a horrific moment, Yeah. And he was, started to isolate and became depressed and, typical symptoms of PTSD. And after about, I think it was maybe a month later, they did 2 sessions of EMDR, maybe 3, and he's back to normal. And, he actually came and hugged the therapist,
That's incredible. That is so PTSD. This is very, very effective for PTSD. And how about for children?
Oh yeah, absolutely. For children, it's very quick because they don't have 50 years of connections trying to manage this trauma, and it gets to be sort of calcified and protected. This trauma, they're 9 or 8, so it's very effective. It's very quick. Even if you have to alter things in the procedure, using, like I was just talking to a client yesterday. And actually, we're gonna do a little video for my training, and the negative cognition, like we would say, it would be I'm weak or I'm stupid or something like that. But this little girl said, I'm a scaredy cat, was her negative cognition, and so you make an adjustment like that, and they did this wonderful process where she was fearless. She said, I'm going to be fearless, Yeah, it was, and then she was painting while she was processing. So she made a picture. It was a nightmare. Somebody was chasing her, and she thought, well, maybe he's chasing me because I dropped my phone and he wants to bring me my phone. So maybe he's not bad at all. So those kind of things where the therapist, you could never tell the child, well, maybe the child, it comes from within the person, whether it's a 9-year-old or a 60-year-old. The answer is within the client. It's not within the therapist. And a lot of times therapists have a hard time just shutting up because you don't know, and the client will tell you what they need, and it'll show up during the EMDR process. So yeah.
So that's very effective for nightmares and phobias, which I found very interesting because for the phobia part, I used I'm scared of the dark. I don't know why. I always think someone's going to attack me. No one's attacked me.
Right.
I don't think. And so I was able to work through that being scared of the dark phobia. And my mind took me to at the end of the session, I started laughing. It was almost comical of what my brain revealed to me. And I have not been scared of the dark since.
I know. I keep telling, I have to raise my prices. Like, people are curing phobias. That usually costs money. It used to cost money. That's not uncommon. There was a woman in my training in Melbourne, and she was afraid of pools because somebody like almost drowned her as a joke when she was 6 or something. They were playing with her. She thought she was going to die. She would get anxious just seeing a pool. So she would drive. If she knew there was a pool on that road, she's taking another way around. She's not going past the pool to that extent. So she's 50. She took my training, and she brought a bathing suit because she said, okay, we'll see. Hey, let's see if this thing works. And she was swimming at lunchtime. She caused fear. Like, if you know what caused the phobia, it's usually pretty easy to fix. It usually takes 1 or 2. And she knew what the cause was. Sometimes those phobias are mysterious. They take a little more time. Like if you get in an elevator you've been in 1,000 times and you have a panic attack in it today. Yes. Well, it's not really about the elevator. What is that? So those are more complicated. But if I'm somebody almost drowned me, and that's why I'm afraid of a pool. Even yours, that was a bit mysterious, but it worked out. So sometimes you get lucky.
I kind of knew it was from a scary movie I watched when I was 5. For some reason, my parents put that on. So I kind of had a little bit of a starting point. But what about the other thing that's really cool is the future template. So you can use EMDR because lots of my clients, they've got things coming up, or they're very stressed about these upcoming events, and you can use it for that.
Yeah, anytime there's some anxiety provoking situation. So and sometimes the client, it's for a lot of times if someone has to go to litigation or a mediation in a divorce, or I had to have my knee replaced, and I was kind of okay with it. But then a few days before, I'm getting really anxious. I said, what's going on here? So we just did a future template on the surgery, and I'd never been in an operating room. So what's the scariest part? I don't know, being wheeled into the room or whatever, because I hadn't done it yet. So
Yeah.
you sort of have to conjure up the image that you think it is, and then did a session on that, and I went home the same day from my knee replacement. I was relaxed, and so I think EMDR had a lot to do with that. Yeah, so medical things, litigation, and any sort of anxiety. Like people to come to the training, sometimes they're going to take their licensing exam like in a month, so you can do a future template on taking your licensing exam, so you're more relaxed about that. So yeah, it reduces the anxiety for any of those kind of upcoming things that are a little bit fearful. Pregnant mothers who haven't had a baby and they're kind of anxious about first time delivery of a baby or anything like that is beneficial. It reduces the anxiety and the stress, and the research is real clear that when you do that, you get a quicker recovery, a better outcome. Everything kind of goes along smoother with just a future template on the medical side of things.
That's very helpful. Speaking of research, what does research say about the effectiveness of EMDR?
There's been 30 years of research, and overall, it says that it's often compared to exposure therapies, because that was the therapy before EMDR came on the scene, where you sort of ride the elevator 1,000 times and then it sort of habituates and you're no longer afraid. With EMDR, you don't have to ride it 1,000 times. You do EMDR and go see if you can ride it, and if you can't, you come back. So yeah, the research is really clear. It's a really quick. It's faster than other therapies, and it's durable. There's been these longitudinal studies, which those are the golden standard, where they go back to the client a year later. Hey, when you think of that thing we worked on, is it a problem for you? 2 or 3 years follow up on those things, and there's been like 45 of those randomized control studies, and I think about a dozen with kids showing that it's durable and effective. So and it's fast. I mean, it's really just fast. You don't need to go to therapy for years. I mean, it's a short-term therapy because it's moving at the speed of thought, not at the speed of talk. That's why there's no talking. The client's healing themselves as fast as they can think through this, as fast as they'll heal.
Yeah. I think it's incredible. You can heal yourself. Your mind, your body, everything is there within you. It's just you got to get that, process it. You have to allow yourself to process it. People want to just ignore it, shoving it down, pretend it didn't happen. Well, it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to stay. It's going to stay right there.
Your psyche will let you get away with that for decades, and then one day, I'm having a panic attack in this elevator that I've been in 1,000 times. And what's that about? It's about that thing you've been avoiding for 30 years. Ooh. Time's up. So, and that's a Jungian idea, is that our unconscious is an ally or an adversary. So if you're doing work and not avoiding, it'll help you. It'll give you dreams. It'll do anything that can do to help. Like, I don't know if you want to talk about the help that you got. You were not thinking about, maybe I'm not going to do my brother's death. But the unconscious, somewhere along the line, there came a message like, maybe I should do this. Right. So that happens a lot when people are, on the fence maybe, or not avoiding. But once you avoid it, then that's where the pathology comes from. I mean, trauma, these distressing things they're energy, and you can't pretend that its energy's not there. It's there and it's coming for you. So it's better to go there voluntarily and resolve it. But oftentimes people wait until they just feel so much distress that they just, hey, please help me. I'll do anything to feel better. And then they show up in our office.
I know it stinks that it gets to that point where they're just like, okay, help me. So we talked about what's the youngest age that it's effective for, and what would be the oldest age?
They do EMDR with 2-year-olds. Like, I don't know how they do that.
How that's possible.
But I don't know how. But they're working with really young kids. I mean, I know Jackie Flynn is a friend of mine. She works here in Cocoa. I know she works with 3-year-olds, and she has sand tray, and they play. And while they're playing, she's tapping as they're thinking about an upsetting thing or something. So there's all sorts of things that they do with younger kids, because you don't have to eat. You don't have to have a high cognitive function to heal. And to learn. So, and then the oldest, I guess I've I treated an 85-year-old priest before he died. We had some issues that he wanted to resolve before his death, and he was frail.
Wow.
Father, yeah, he was a really nice dude. He died shortly after our work. He wanted, he
Wow.
wanted to get this done. Yeah, and also today's the anniversary actually of my best friend's death. He died 2 years ago. And I did an EMDR session when he was in hospice on his deathbed.
Oh,
He wanted to resolve something that happened to him when he was renting from this older couple. It was relatively recent. Wasn't sure whether he's going to live in Ireland or stay here in the States, and he's kind of a gentle, spiritual guy, and he doesn't like when there's conflict. So I helped him work through that. It was maybe the most meaningful EMDR session I ever did. We did it over the phone because he was up in Philadelphia, and he tapped himself. I said, "What are you noticing?" And he sort of was able to mumble because he was on drugs, but he knew what was going on. So it was really a privilege in my life, to do that for my best friend, about 2 weeks before he died.
wow, that's incredible. It's over the phone and he's tapping. He's not even using the machine. And it was one of the most meaningful experiences you've ever had. That's
Yeah. Again, well, I'll give this a try, John. I mean, I'm happy to do something for you because you feel kind of helpless. Like I
yeah.
can't do anything for my dear friend. I don't know. Maybe he called me because he knew I wanted to do something, and I could. The only thing I know how to do is EMDR. So I don't know if he was doing that for me or if he was letting me do that for him. But it was kind of an amazing experience. Yeah, that he shifted. It was very interesting how he was like stuck in this candy in the image and he couldn't move, and then he started to figure out how to get out of that and move on and move forward. So he had an adaptive shift on his deathbed.
That's the whole powerful part of it, is that shift. Like I was stuck in a certain scene on the day of my brother's death, and I couldn't move myself off of that one image. And I haven't really thought about that particular moment since. So it is very effective. Now, I have had people who have done EMDR, but they don't see good results, or they don't feel different. What do you think happened there?
There's bad EMDR therapists out there.
That
There's
they're probably
bad.
talking, maybe like they're interrupting the thought.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and sometimes the client, it's not perfect. It doesn't always work for everybody, but yeah, I hear, stories. And when somebody comes in, I don't want to do that EMDR stuff. I tried it and I had somebody do it, didn't work. And then, I just asked them a couple questions. Well, what was your negative belief? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, what do you mean you know what I'm talking about? She
Yeah.
just waved her hands in front of my face and said, "What are you feeling?" And like, well, that's not really EMDR. And I don't know if that's true, if that's the client's perception or if that's what was going on, but it could be that. It could be that, I mean, I just recently, there's somebody advertising EMDR, certified EMDR trainings, and it's not EMDRIA approved, and it's like 28 hours, and it's a discount, it's cheap, and it's not an EMDRIA approval. I don't know who's teaching it. I don't even know if they have. It's like watching videos. It would be hard to learn EMDR by just watching videos. So there's bad. Yeah, you have to do your due diligence if you're going to find an EMDR therapist. I usually tell people to go to emdria.org. They're the credentialing body, and there's a directory, and at least they've gotten like credentialed training. So
Perfect. That's very helpful, because it's important that our clients are finding the appropriate people to do EMDR with, because this is such a powerful treatment. I don't want them to lose faith. And it's just like finding a good therapist. They try a couple therapists, they're not good. They don't even look at them. They don't talk to them, or they're typing on their computer the whole session. The people are like, well, I'm never going back to therapy. You have to
no,
just.
I know. I've heard stories where people turn on the machine and they open their mail. Like, what? What are you doing? This person's like, in hell. They're processing trauma, and you're checking your texting. So yeah, I mean, there's bad dentists, bad doctors, bad
Right.
therapists, and sometimes it's the client is not willing. EMDR requires for you to surrender. You have to let whatever wants to happen. You can't block stuff. So if you're going to you want to control things and you don't want to go certain places where EMDR wants to take you, then that's kind of on the client. They're not allowing it to do what it does, and it's not really the therapist's fault at all. So I don't want to say, if they get a bad result, it's always the therapist's fault. I mean, it could be either or.
That's a great point, because even when I did it, I was stuck. I could not. It was like I was surrounded with people that I didn't really know, and I was like, do I want to be crying? Because of course that's what's going to happen when I start to go down this memory. And I was just kind of stuck. And then Ryan, of course, came over and facilitated beautifully. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I really want this to be effective. And then that was it. He came over, he asked the perfect interweave question, and that was it. The tears came flooding down, and the experience began. So I know how healing it can be personally, and so I want that for my clients as well.
Yeah, and it is a weird situation. You don't know these people, and can I trust them? Can I be vulnerable? I mean, those are legitimate questions to withhold, right? You know, but it turns out you had a really good, safe, cohesive group that you were working with. So
Yeah, it was beautiful, and that's the important part of having that good rapport with your client too. They got to feel safe.
it's essential. It's
Yeah.
essential.
Well, you are absolutely phenomenal. Tell everyone where they can get your book, how they can get a hold of you, where therapists can take your training.
My book, I guess the easiest place to get it is at Amazon. It's just type in Dr. Andrew Dobo. I have two books, The Unburdening Souls at the Speed of Thought, and then The Hero's Journey, integrating Jungian psychology with EMDR therapy. And they're not like therapy books. I mean, they could be for therapists or for people who are interested in EMDR. The first one is almost like a memoir. Like my story's kind of mixed in with some cases that kind of explain these 6 stages that people go through whenever they kind of take this journey. And then the second one is, tells you how to, the third part is how do you work with a dream? Like it takes a dream and breaks it apart so people can start working with their dreams. And then the first part is about the hero's 12 steps of the hero's journey. What are those? What are the hero's story? Like every hero has a sidekick. Like Frodo had Sam, right? So every hero, it has a wound, a defect, right? So the hero walks in the door, they have a diagnosis, they're wounded, right? And we're like their sidekick. We're going to keep them safe. We're going to help them get through their journey. And so there's 12 stages of that. To look at the work, more mythically, it sort of gives it, a richer kind of experience, because those myths, someone didn't just make those up. They came from like the human experience, and then they reflect the human experience. And EMDR really, in a really truncated period of time, takes you through that kind of journey where you get to the other side. So Amazon, that's the easiest place to find my books. My website is emdreducators.com. And there's a lot of information about, if you wanted to take my training, or a lot of information about EMDR. There's a lot of people that I've trained over the years. There's a directory there if you're looking for somebody in your area because I'm pretty sure most of the people I've trained have good training. And if they put their name on the directory, they're serious about EMDR. Some people take the training and I don't like this stuff. I don't know, like all this emotion, and it's not their thing. It's not for them, and that's fine. So not everybody, but certainly a lot of the people I think get good training when they come to my training.
Perfect. I love it. Yeah, you are an excellent trainer. One of the ladies that here in my building was trained by you. So she loves you too. She loved the training. She loves EMDR. And I really hope that this has helped anyone watching feel more comfortable with maybe looking up a credentialed EMDR therapist to help them get through anything, any stuck point, any distressing event that's really affecting your quality of life, because we want you to enjoy your life.
Yeah, I think a simple way to think about it, a really simple way, is if you think about something that happened to you a few years ago and you get upset about it or angry or something, that's not supposed to happen. It's over and done with. So EMDR can get rid of that emotionality that you're feeling. If you were bullied in high school and you're 50, and when you think about it, you get all upset over again, that needs an EMDR session to target that bullying. And
Yes,
you can get rid of that so it doesn't affect. So that it's a real simple way to understand EMDR. It really does get rid of this lingering emotionality and body sensations that we're not supposed to be carrying around with us.
that's right. I mean, I have clients that are carrying on things that 20, 30, 40 years. And I'm like, okay, it's time. It's time. Let's release yourself from this.
I know. And then sometimes they release it and they say, "Are you kidding me? Like, it doesn't bother me. It took you 45 minutes and I've been suffering with this for 20 years." Like,
And
if I had written for every time I heard that story. So, yeah, I mean, EMDR, and I don't want people to think, there's no talking when you see an EMDR therapist. Like, we do EMDR, and then we have to talk. We have talk
we
sessions in
process.
between. How's your life changing? What might we do next? So it's not like you're going to come in and never talk. That's not how it works. We do EMDR during that process, and we don't talk. But before and after, sometimes there's a couple sessions where we just talk and find out what's next and where you're struggling. How can we navigate this, and how can we apply some EMDR to, improve your quality of life or however. So
It's beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Dr. Dobo. You are incredible.
well,
Uh,
thanks for inviting me. It
of
was a pleasure.
course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a pleasure working with you right in the front row there when we were doing the training. So,
I loved it. I loved it.
yeah.
For everyone watching, thank you so much for watching another episode of the Just Help Out Mindset podcast, where we are breaking the stigma around mental health one episode at a time. I will see you at our next episode.
Thanks.